Hello! Welcome to the live stream. We have a guest who we've had on before, but this is our first time that we have had a virtual guest on the live stream. Last week I did my review of my spending year to date for 2021. So everything that I had spent for from January through July of 2021 and like how it compared to what my predictions were going to be for the year. And that live stream actually got like a lot of views afterwards and people seemed relatively interested in it. And I have long wanted to talk more about other people's budgets because I think that my budget is extremely specific. Like I have never proposed that I have the a typical spending pattern, nor am I prescribing it for anyone. And KMikeyM, who has been on the podcast and we did a live stream together when I was down in LA a couple months ago, is a publicly traded person, the world's first publicly traded person. So people can buy shares in him. And last month, shareholders, which includes me, voted and forced him to track all of his expenses for a month and publish them as part of a Google Sheet. And I was very interested in finding a way to like talk about other people's budgets. And since KMikeyM already has his publicly out there, I'm just like excited to try this out. I would love to do this for folks, especially folks in different countries and different living circumstances than me. But KMikeyM is very like upfront with his finances, and it is harder to find people that want to share their finances on the internet. So I'm excited that we get someone to lure in to talk about this. Oh, thank you for the compliment on the tie. Fun fact about this tie. I I had to buy a bunch of ties on very short notice from Amazon for a shoot that I was doing. I think it was the like series I did with Vice, and I had to have like a ton of different suits to change into, and I needed a bunch of ties, and I ordered tons from Amazon, and I ended up returning the vast majority of them. And I thought I returned this one, and I got credit for it, but it turned out that it actually hadn't been returned. But Amazon gave me credit, and so now I own this tie. I think it's a children's tie though, because it actually like fits me, which means it's probably a children's tie, inevitably. So yeah, thanks Emily and Joe for the compliments on the tie. How are folks doing this week? Have we lived through the week? Who's under a new lockdown? I know that Australia is like in a snap lockdown, which is a very Australian way to describe a lockdown. But I don't know if it's all of Australia or it's just Melbourne, I think, possibly. Anyway, some parts of the world are in lockdowns. Other parts of the world are continuing on despite uh, pandemic raging out of control as though nothing has happened. So we're all just soldiering on. I have noticed that things have started to get canceled in the way that things were getting canceled in March 2020 in my life. Like the it's not quite as dramatic as having 1 week where like 5 speaking gigs get canceled in a matter of a couple days, but I have noticed that things in the fall are starting to reconsider whether or not it's going to happen. So we'll see if I'm going abroad. Joe says we are not in lockdown. We just can't leave the state. Oh, cool. So you're just trapped in Western Australia. Sounds great. Haven't you not been able to leave the state for like ages though? I felt like there was like not cross state travel. That's very hard to conceive of as an American because we have too many states to. I know you have significantly less states despite having as much land, but it's hard to conceive of. I mean, legally, I don't even think they could do that in the US where they could restrict you for moving between states, but it's just hard to wrap my head around. How did people's weeks go? What what happened in your life this week? In financial news for people in the States this week, eviction moratorium has been extended, but there's a challenge in the courts right now, so it's a little up in the air, but some local jurisdictions have extended it. The CDC recommended it, but the CDC can only do it for a short period of time. But other big news is that once again, student loan interest and payments have continued to be suspended. So there are another 6 months added onto that for U.S. federal student loans. Still does not apply if you have private student loans, but if you have federal student loans in the U.S., essentially you don't have to make payments on them for another while. So Joe says it's gotten worse. We aren't letting our own residents back in anymore. Ooh, that's not good. That's strict. Not even like if they quarantine. I don't. This is my very. I mean, we've barely had restrictions here for so long, it's like hard to wrap my head around it. But you are doing a lot better with COVID than we are here, so you know. I was reading an interview with Rosie O'Donnell this week. I read this whole like long piece about how Rosie O'Donnell chose to come out, and something I didn't realize that Rosie O'Donnell like never actually denied that she was a lesbian when she had like the #1 talk show. She just, and everybody at the network knew, she just like never brought it up for a very long time. But she was talking about her breaking point in having the show was realizing that she had enough money, more money than she said anybody could reasonably spend in their life, and was donating all of this money and trying to make a difference. And she always thought that having money would allow her to solve problems. And the Columbine school shooting made her realize that there were things that no amount of money could fix. And I was thinking about that in the context of the United States has all the money. We have more money than most countries. I mean, we have more money than all countries, but we have more money than many countries combined as far as GDP and our ability to have the full faith and credit of the US government backing all of this debt so that we can print money. And yet, we can't really escape a public health crisis. We have not we have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we obviously were able to buy all of the vaccines, but we still are getting hit hard by COVID again for like whatever infinity wave this is right now. And it's one of those moments of like realizing that there is a limit to what the power of having more money than is conceivable, even on a macroeconomic scale, like can't fix everything. Yeah, I don't know. It's very fascinating. Emily says, wasn't that an issue with Australia last year too? A bunch of people getting stranded. Yeah, I do know that like a bunch of Australians in India during the like big Indian like Delta peak before it was named Delta were stuck there. Like a bunch of Australians that were like Indians either by ethnicity or just were visiting there were not able to come back. Not even quarantine, it's getting dystopian. Ooh, that is very dystopian. I mean, that's I mean, it's better. Is it better than COVID though? I don't know. Anyway, should we dive into our topic for today? Oh, I haven't introduced the donut yet before we go. Although maybe I'll have our guest on. We can both introduce our donuts. And then we can talk about KMikeyM's expenses. Joe says, oh yeah, we refuse to allow people back from India. Cool. That's still going on? I feel like the time scale of everything. When was the peak of Delta in India? Was it months ago? Was it last week? I don't know. I've lost all sense of time. Oh no. What if we build a big wall next? Oh, well, sounds relevant. Okay, I'm gonna have bring our guest on. Well, actually, I'm gonna have our vaccines runner of the stream, who's also doing this remotely. This is like fully remote stream today. Bring on our guest, and we'll both introduce our donuts. Hi, hello. Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I like that this is just part of my regular rotation now. It's just like, oh yeah, when can I get back on Oh My Dollar?
I like that you're like our one person that's willing to come on to share their budget. So
I'm like your
this
field.
Is part of your media rotation.
I'm like your field correspondent.
Ooh, I like that. Or like, Emily says you're a recurring guest star. I like that.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, exactly. I want that residual money.
Or maybe you're part of like the Oh My Dollar verse. Like, you know, we have like a megaverse kind of style thing. Part of the lore. Okay, well, I'm going to introduce my donut.
Okay.
I don't have someone to do the donut cam today. So my donut is a corn fritter. There are actual pieces of corn on it. Like, if you look at the back, you can see the pieces of corn. But then it's like maple syrup and corn. I don't know. It sounds kind of fantastic, or it's going to be disaster. I haven't.
It reminds me of that.
Really figured out.
That reminds me of that corn pizza in Southeast Portland. Have you been, what's that? Dove Vivi. Have you been there?
Oh yeah. It's like the gluten-free pizza.
I have the most boring donut. I just got a toasted coconut cake donut. I was in a hurry. I went to Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, that sounds classic, though. Did you get it for free for being vaccinated?
Oh, I should have. I have my card. I didn't even think about that. No, I paid $1.39 for it.
Oh, what a ripoff!
It actually is a ripoff because I actually have a money donut story. I was on my bike and I was going on a long ride and I was totally bonking, and I pulled over to go to this donut shop, and they only took cash, and I was like, I was on my bike, I didn't have cash, and so I was super disappointed. I was like, oh, no problem, I'll figure something else out. And the woman was like, oh no, it's no problem, just pay me next time. Rang me up, gave me the receipt, 2 donuts and a water. I was like, like a stranger in LA, you can't just give a person free stuff. I was so moved. It's become like my place I go out of my way to go to now in LA. It's just like a little donut stand.
Did you pay them next time?
I not only paid them next time, but now I get excited whenever I'm just even a little bit low blood sugar on my ride. I mean, they made me like a customer for life. So yeah, it totally worked. It was a good tactic.
Cheryl is clarifying that bonking equals tired. Yeah, bonking is like when it's. Do only cyclists use it? I think
that was my question. I only know it.
Yeah,
from
I don't
cyclists.
know.
Yeah, it's like
I've only ever heard it from cycling,
bicycle.
but yeah, it's like hangry plus fatigued, but it has to do with like both not enough electrolytes usually, because you can often fix it with just electrolytes. But yeah.
Yeah,
if you wait too long to eat and
helps.
You're still exercising, then you bonk, which is like you can avoid bonking if you start eating early. But
if you put just a little bit of thought into it, which I don't. Yeah.
Emily says, I have never in my life heard it used that way. Interesting. Okay. Oh. Yeah.
Wow.
And Emily says, and I don't cycle, so yeah, maybe it's only cyclists that use it. I guess I've never heard it in my other sport. I've never heard like a figure skater be like, I'm bonking. But also figure skating is an anaerobic sport. There's only so many sports where someone is out there doing cardio for, possibly 6+ hours.
Right.
So,
not even swimming. Like, I don't think you're going to, you'll get tired and hungry, but you're not doing it for that long, Yeah. That's interesting.
Joe has pointed out that it is like bonking is kind of a funny word. I didn't even think about that. I'm so used to the term. The Emily says I'm just picturing Doge. It's true.
Oh, speaking of Doge,
I'm just gonna say the Australian can't make fun of us for funny words.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Do we want to dive into your
Let's do it.
budget? Great. All right.
I have a quick question. Did the concept of eating donuts on the show come from the donut charts, or is it unrelated to that?
It is in fact unrelated. So the reason
when I was putting my chart together, I was like, oh, this must be why, but I'm wrong. Okay.
No, I wish. That would be clever. But the donut charts way preceded me eating donuts on the show, but I did not connect them until like much later. But the reason I started eating donuts on the show was because I live directly above a donut shop. And I was like, when it went in, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to come up with a set of rules. Because I'm not gonna be able to, like I need to have a framework in order to approach this. So my theory was, if I eat it on the live stream, then I can only have it when I'm live streaming, and I get a tax deducted. And it's a very good system.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's the whole reason I do it, which has turned out to be really good because the donut shop only moved in like shortly before COVID, and we were doing these only like twice a month for patrons, and then when lockdown started, we started doing them every week as a lockdown activity, and now we're just kind of live with it. But once a week donut is a reasonable donut consumption, I feel like.
Yeah, I had the same thought of a donut framework as I started biking by this same shop every day. I was like, this can't be every day. I can't get a donut or I could just not bike, and it would be like the same on my body probably. But yeah, so now it's just like when I'm bonking, when I feel low blood sugar, I'll stop and get one. But yeah, okay, sorry. Moving on. Getting into the.
But then you don't get a tax deducted. I mean, that's the real question.
That's true.
All right. I'm going to have you walk us through. So, first of all, I guess we should set the stage. Why did you record all of these expenses?
So every month with my shareholders, I put up for vote a monthly challenge, and so it's been things like meditate every day or get 8 hours of sleep, and then sometimes this current month I'm doing a 3-minute podcast every day because I'm going to be doing some traveling. So it's like my travel diary audio version, and so every month there's these different challenges, and last month was. Track my spending, which is something I did years and years ago. We called it, a friend and I did it. It was just an open public spreadsheet. It was actually might be interesting to go back and look at those old ones, but we called it radical fiscal transparency. And I remember at the time getting kind of yelled at for like what I spent my money on, because at the time I was working like a full-time job and making more than a lot of my friends who were kind of like artist, creative, or freelance. And so it seemed like I was very, and I'm sure it was like, when you have a steady paycheck coming in, you're definitely a lot more free with when you spend your money than when you're just like, I don't know when I'm going to get paid again.
Yeah, I've been public about my expenses online for like over a decade now, and people have a lot of opinions when you share what you spend your money on. But it goes the other way. People criticize me for spending too little because they view it as a reflection of their own spending. Right. Where they'll be like, not everybody can afford to or can like spend only $130 a month on groceries. And I'll be like, I literally never said anything about your spending. Yep. I just posted how much I spent on stuff.
The intro, yeah. In the intro, when you were like, I'm a bad example, like I'm a bad, not example, but like, you're a bad representation of an average spender. I was like, oh, I'm not a good one either. I'm in a very strange and unique set of circumstances that we can get into. But then my thought was, wait, aren't we all? Like, maybe there is no normal in spending.
That's what I think is so interesting about talking about other people's expenses, because one of the core tenets of both my book and when I teach personal finance workshops is I say there is no such thing as a perfect budget. There is no perfect budget out there. You cannot download what is the best amount of money to spend on everything from the internet and then implement it, because one, it won't work. You won't stick to it if it doesn't have your own values, your own lifestyle baked into it. It just won't work. And two, there is no perfect reflection. My budget has one of my core values in budgeting is whimsy. That is not a thing that other people value as highly as I do. And you might be very a lot of people need a car to get around, and I set up my life so that I don't have a car, but I also spend a lot of money on cat print dresses. What I value, sparkly spandex and platform boots, is not necessarily what you value, and that doesn't necessarily, that isn't being public about your expenses isn't necessarily, it's not meant to shame other people. It's just, I find it very interesting.
Same.
And sometimes I think that's one of the most interesting things about people keeping journals on the Oh My Dollar forums. We have people from all different countries and walks of life, and everybody's at a different place on where their finance journey is both going and where they are on it. And I think that's far more interesting than this idea that you have to hit a certain net worth by a certain age, or you should be saving this percentage in your 401k or you're failing. And I think humans like rules. And so we want to feel like there are set goalposts, that you have to buy a house by the age of 30 or whatever. But
it's also, it's numbers. I think the fact that money is numbers also means it wants rules. Both we want rules, we want to be told what to do, but then money itself wants a structure and a rule set, because you're it's so clean when everything lines up and in the perfect columns and percentages. And you're well, you could live like a robot if you want, if you really want to build the budget, but it has to be adaptable. I think I totally agree. And one thing I found really strange was knowing that I was sharing it, even I don't think that many people were checking in. I let people comment on it, and I only got a couple comments from people. Knowing that I was sharing it definitely had that effect of changing my spending habits a little bit. I was I need to buy a new bike helmet. I'll do that next month so it doesn't show up on here.
So
like just like that
as
shame of
someone,
spending too much. It's like it's very real.
because I've been sharing my expenses every month for like a decade now, I always have that in the back of my head of like, okay, if I buy this, it's going to be public. And, I can hide things in categories if I really want to. There's some things that maybe I'm not going to be as obvious on the internet about spending money on. They might go under a broad category. But like, I always try to get people when they take a budgeting class with me to get to track their expenses for on paper for at least a week. And I tell them that I don't want them to judge themselves. I don't want them to change their behavior. I just want them to be a passive observer. But I also know that it doesn't work for anyone. If you are actively tracking on paper, you have that awareness of you're going to have to write it down. And what I don't want people to do is try to not think about it and then sit down at the end of the week and write down everything they spent, because the goal is to make you actively think about the process of spending money, but not with judgment. But, money is just an exchange of value. And I think people forget and value has two meanings for a reason, right? Like, I don't know. It is important to remember that even though the numbers, you want them to have power and you want them to have rules, they're just a reflection of values. And it's easy to get caught up in the shame. Anyway, let's look at your expenses.
Let's look at my values. Yeah. So this is my month of July, and I think there was probably 2 or 3 times where I didn't get a small thing. There's definitely some, we'll get into it later, but I think I basically got the majority of it. So if we move on to the next slide, the total amount that I tracked spending was basically $2,500, which was a little higher than I thought it was going to be, because over the last couple months I've been really trying to stay in this like $1,500 to $2,000 range, just because I don't have steady income right now. And so I've been really trying to cut things out, but there was a couple sort of bigger expenses. So next slide. I was tracking my average daily spend just because I was doing it in a spreadsheet, and it was always interesting, like mentally, if you have that number and you're watching it change, you really try to come in under it, and so there'd definitely be times. This probably affected me more than people knowing, is when there was a big purchase, I'd wait until the next day to make it, because I didn't want my 1 day average or my 1 day number to be higher than my average daily spend. So I kept trying to be lower than that. But that number, even though the $2,500 in the month seems fine to me, this number feels high to me for some reason. And I don't know why that is, but the idea that I'm spending like $55 a day feels pretty crazy. I don't know. I guess because the value of those things is spread out over time.
It's a thing to think about.
Yeah. And then if you go to the next slide, I only had 3 days of not spending any money, which is also very surprising. I thought for sure there was going to be.
Is that something you usually track? Is it like, because some people try to go for no spending days.
I love the idea. I just assumed it was going to be like half the days, because it's like, what do? I'm on the computer, I ride a bike. That's it. There's nothing else to do. Like those are my 2. I go to the gym, You got
to get those donuts though when you're on your bike.
That's true. Yeah. So this was that was the one where I was like, okay, that's the thing I think I would attack the most if I did this again. I'd be like, I want to up my days of no spending. So then on the next slide, I talk about what I call my big weirds, which is things that I spent money on that were a little bit unusual. And that was the Playdate came out. There's a picture of it there, and I did a pre-order for that. And that was a lot. It was like $230.
Explain what a Playdate is.
It's this device that you see in the slide. It's a strange little handheld independent game hardware system with a crank. You should look up Playdate if you're into games at all. I think they're sold out till next year, but still it's coming soon. It was a pre-order. It's the company that I used to work for. I worked for them for 10 years, and I'm very excited about it. So I bought a Playdate. That was like a big chunk of that was like $230. we bought this Wirecutter's recommended air filter for the house because there's not currently a lot of smoke in LA, and I was like, by the time there is, and there definitely will be eventually, I wanted to make sure to have one. So I bought that and a couple extra filters. So that was a little bit of money. I made this
Oh, Emily
investment.
described the play date well.
Oh
What
yeah,
if a Palm Pilot was a Game Boy? Seems to be the vibe.
yes, exactly, with a crank plus crank. Yeah, that's a very great vibe. I love my Palm
So
Pilot.
yeah, the air filter thing was a thing we did too, where we like bought all of our extra air filters in January after experiencing the really bad air last year.
Yeah, it's wild. I'm leaving tomorrow morning to go on this road trip. We're going diagonal from LA up towards Toronto, basically, and I'm wondering how much of that smoke we're going to hit on that drive. But yeah, the third thing there, Vint investment. So one of the things that I love, and we'll get into this later, is I love spending money on alternative investments, which is ways to put your money to work that are incredibly unusual and may or may not pay off. Vint.co is a company that lets you invest in fractionalized ownership of lots of wine. And by lots, I mean not like a lot of them, but a collection of them. So they'll pick a bunch of champagnes that they think are going to be worth more in 5, 10, 15 years. And, they'll raise like $70,000 to buy this amount. And then you can buy shares in that structure of thing. And for me, that's incredibly exciting.
Is it wines that you're investing in like from the making of, or like already made wines?
I think they're going to do some pre-order stuff because some of the wineries do that where they'll sell futures basically. But in this case, it was wines that were already made and have some value that they expect to go up. So it's a really strange combination of like looking at the wine industry and the trends and, and there's versus, as a financial object, not as a consumable and but you can't totally separate it from that. So it's really interesting. I also had some major bike repairs, which, is like infrequent but regular, like that's going to happen every couple months. That, when we drove across the country over the holidays, when we drove back, especially, there was a lot of salt on the road and we had the bikes on the back. And I think that really screwed up a lot of the gears and things on the bike. And then we did a 4th of July celebration with some friends who were Canadian. So I felt like I had to really like represent America. So I kind of went a little crazy at Vaughn's and spent a little bit more on, so our grocery bill was a little bit higher than usual because of that. I bought like little American flags for the kids. It was pretty funny. They immediately threw them in the pool and I was like, that's allowed. Yeah. Freedom,
Was the like former military part of you like, don't throw flags in the
Oh
pool?
no, I'm a big pro. You have the right to burn the flag. Like I love that. Like I'm like that's why I joined. I joined the military so that you could burn a flag. Like if you don't burn a flag, that's disrespectful. That's maybe too far, but yeah. Okay. Next slide's the big meat of it. So this is by category in order. Pie chart's a little hard to read, but yeah, biggest expenses, groceries. I do pre-pandemic. I was really good about like doing a lot of Costco shopping, and then augmenting that was like a couple of higher end places. Like there's a fish market we really like, and these kind of things. During the pandemic, I really fell back on like old habits and like just went to Whole Foods, which is very expensive, and definitely like I'm weaning myself off of that. So on the other hand, I think both Catherine and I love good food, and groceries is always going to be a pretty high budget item for us. So investments, that 360, that's the total amount that I invested in wine this month. So that was entirely, it was just like my only investment this month. No retirement, just a wine investment. This was shocking, was tennis was $336. So I do a weekly tennis lesson. That's $60. It's an hour long. And then there's a couple other small tennis expenses. And so I was a little surprised that tennis was that high, especially when you look at the next category, health and fitness. We go to like a pretty nice gym. It's not quite, if you're familiar with Portland, there's the Multnomah Athletic Club. It's not that fancy.
Yeah.
It's a very nice gym. It has like a hotel in it and other things. And it's like one of the
Wait,
things
it has a hotel in the gym.
in the gym. The gym is also a hotel. Yeah. It's the LA Athletic Club. You can look it up. It's amazing. They have like a cocktail bar and like a pool on the third floor. It has a giant
So
chandelier on it.
So
This is
because
values.
I have a question about value. Yeah,
Yep,
no. But
yep.
I have because this is actually an example I brought up in my book because for me, back when ClassPass was unlimited, I was spending $80 a month on ClassPass, and like milking every possible thing out of it. I'd go every single day to a different class, and
Yep.
I got my marginal cost down to like $2 a class. But I was talking about how I was looking for another gym, and I was talking with someone else, and they were like, I'd been doing all this research. I had a spreadsheet, of course, and they were like, oh my God, you're thinking about a $40 a month gym? Like, that's so expensive. And to me, that was a deal because I was used to $80 a month for ClassPass. And they were like at Planet Fitness for like $10 a month or something. And it was just such a great expression to me of like, yeah, but this is something I value. Like, I'm a former athlete. Like, I guess I'm still an athlete. I'll call myself an athlete.
Nike would call you an athlete.
Yeah, Nike would call me an athlete. That's only because they lost the class action lawsuit, so now they have to admit that people are athletes.
But I think they have a slogan that like, if you have a body, you're an athlete. That was like a slogan of theirs for a while.
I know, but it's just because they lost the class action lawsuit after they dropped all their pregnant athletes. So, yeah, anyway, I find it very interesting because a lot of people pay for gyms as an expression of values that goes beyond the health and fitness side. And like,
yes.
For you, it seems like part of the reason you're paying for this is like, it's a club, right? Like you're getting access to, like, is it important in your industry or something?
And I would say there is a lot of social functions attached to the LAAC that I don't fully use, but that I appreciate that they are there. Like the fact that it is in fact that it's independently owned is a huge value that I have, versus like a big box gym or, the money that goes into that gym stays within the community. It's like a single family that owns it and it's not part of some huge chain. They've had the same people working the front desk. There's this guy that's been there forever who takes care, like he shines shoes, but he's also like the caretaker of this one area, and everyone everyone knows his name. And like even when we first started going, it was like it's a gym that definitely skews a little bit older, and someone would pass away and like everyone would know and be like, oh, and there's a real feeling of community within that space. And I've only been going for like, I think it's been about 3 years, so I don't feel like fully part of that aspect of it, but I very much appreciate that. And it's also one of the few times I leave the house anymore. Even before COVID, like in a working from home situation, it's just like you don't have that many chances, and it's downtown, so it's kind of nice to get out. It's 100, and I think it's basically like $200 a month, which is a very high amount of money to pay for a gym. On the other hand, there's so many things, and as you look at this, you might notice that there's no rent or housing on here, which we'll talk about later. But like, it's an expense that I can sort of like be like, because I'm not spending in these other areas, I can put a little bit more money towards. So, yeah. But when I look at like tennis plus health and fitness, and I'm like, oh, like more than $500 a month on, sport, that's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
So then running down this list, the Playdate, that was definitely a one-off. I am a person who gets very and easily addicted to video games, so I don't allow myself to have like a modern console because I would not be a productive human being.
So you have to crank it?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have a lot of gaming expenses. I have a couple things on Steam I like to play or whatever, but it's not a big part of my spending. So that's pretty unusual. This network IT hosting category is things like subscriptions to like StreamYard and, hosting and all of those kind of things combined together, as well as half of the fiber bill. We recently cut the cord.
So that's business expenses for you as well.
Yes.
Like you're including business expenses in here.
Yeah, yep. Because for me, man, it's hard to even differentiate those things. I don't have a business entity for KMikeyM because I'm a publicly traded person and not a publicly traded company. And I think if there's a company, those things get a little more complicated and into the legal gray area of what
But does
my
it go
project
on your
is.
Schedule C?
I just pay. I don't do any. I have no business entity at all. So it's all just. So I think no.
Oh, KMikeyM, we gotta get you to
We'll
tax
talk about
deduct
this.
this stuff. We'll
Yeah.
talk about this later.
Okay. Yeah. Home stuff, just odds and ends for the house. I think the HEPA filter was in there maybe. Yeah, that's probably right. $99 would be like half of that. Bicycle. I spent too much on my haircut. I got one haircut for $80 because it's like I get undercharged and then I tip a lot. So, but I think it's still under what Kate charges, and she's amazing and is also part of that community. And she does hair for famous people and charges me less, but that's very nice. Dining out, I think, was very low and has been. I think that's a pandemic related thing. That number for us, if it was pre-pandemic times, I'm sure would be much, much higher. Donations is probably that's about on par. I've been tracking my donations this year and making more of a point of trying to give to things that I actually care about and line those up a little bit more with my values. Let's see. Poker would be higher because I've been on a real losing streak, but I play a weekly poker game and I won a couple times, so that's only $60 for last month.
And that's also kind of a business expense.
In my case, it kind of is, which is pretty funny.
Because it's for your shareholders, right?
Yeah,
it's a shareholder
it's our shareholder poker game. Yeah, so that was $60, and then gifts, books, drinks also very low. We are. For drinks, books and drinks, I use the same icon. I was clearly copying and pasting there. For drinks, I include both buying booze for home as well as buying drinks out, but we're very well stocked right now, so that number is low. And this is so like parking.
So one thing I noticed, why is parking so low? You live in LA.
Because most of my parking fees is $2 every time I go to the gym. Because I don't like to bike there, because I don't like to bike downtown. And so I put that in the health and fitness category because in my mind,
that's
mentally,
the extra.
Yeah, exactly. And so this was parking. This was like two different events that had parking. And then normally there'd be a closed budget, but the only thing I bought was a pair of socks. So I just called it socks budget.
Okay, so we have quite a few questions that I want to ask while we're on this screen. So, rent mortgage, question mark.
Let's pause on that and get into it because it's covered on the next slide.
Okay, soon. All right.
Yeah.
Aaron says it's interesting that you count investments as spending. Yeah, that's very interesting to me as well because I count that in my savings category.
Oh, that is interesting. For my alts, I count that as spending, and for my kind of more, I have a Betterment account that's my IRA as well as some other savings, and I count that and a little bit of like stock picking as investments. So I keep my alts separate because a lot of them are not fully liquid. I don't know how to get my money out of that Vint thing, for example. I'd have to contact them and be like, can I sell? I don't know how to, they're just not liquid. So I think of them as an expense that may someday pay off. Kind of like poker. I don't think of poker as an investment.
Christine said we were having a nice combo here and also asked if we were doing another budgeting event in October. Yeah, we are going to do Budgetober again for the third year in a row. So it is coming and you will get stickers if you join. There are many requests for you to show us your socks.
Oh, they're super boring. They're like, I buy these. Here, hang on. I'll grab them. They're just
going to be like black socks, aren't they?
No, they're just these like no-show Saucony. It's like a running brand. They're just like, they're the most boring sock. They come in two colors. I had a pack of them that I bought, and I was like, I need more socks. I'll get the same one. It makes them easier to match when they come out if they're all the same. So yeah, the socks are really boring. It was a pack of socks, which is why it's $14. It wasn't one pair of socks.
Yeah, I mean, I buy single socks that are more than $14 because I
Right,
get
and
fancy socks sometimes.
I
Emily
have one
agrees
pair
that
of
is
fancy
just
socks.
a sock. It's
Yeah.
just socks. They're not
I
exciting
I
socks.
have one pair of socks that I think is worth that was it was like $100 for a pair of socks, but that it was like some
Wait.
weird art thing.
Oh, I was like, I've never bought a $100 pair of socks. That is beyond the level of sock. But I would see them as an art project, perhaps. Although I will say you scoff at socks being worth a lot, but socks can be sold on the internet, so
I mean,
they have value.
That's the thing. That's probably going to become part of my alt investments portfolio. Let's be honest.
Yeah, you could have a side hustle of selling the socks as a publicly traded person.
I think I'm going to buy my first pair of collectible sneakers pretty soon as a investment and just like not wear them. And that feels like an insane thing to
Yeah. I was thinking that a line of business is selling used socks for you. I mean, because there's websites for that.
Yeah. They were a gift. I might be exaggerating on the expense of these socks. But do you know that store in Portland, Stand Up Comedy? It's like they sell like super weird and high-end fashiony things. I got a pair of socks as a gift once from there, and they're amazing. And I know they were very expensive. Anyway.
Okay, so let's talk about what's missing then.
All right, next slide. This next slide was very much based on last week when I was watching yours and being like, for the first thing that's missing on there, obviously, is healthcare, right? Represented by the Band-Aid emoji. I am covered by the VA, and I've never used it, and I don't even really know how. I signed up for the VA after I left my last job to have health insurance. And then COVID hit, and all the stories were very bad. And they were basically sending emails like, please don't come unless it's an emergency. I have like a card that says that I have insurance, and I don't know how to use it. So I haven't really been to the doctor in like a year plus. But
you're in the same category as a lot of people with insurance. Like a lot of us haven't been to the doctor because they were like not doing any appointments. So
my benefit is I'm not paying for it because the VA covers it because I'm not making any income right now. So it works out pretty well. So that's missing. Obviously, the other big thing that's missing is rent or mortgage. I am again, during the pandemic, I lived in a back house of a friend of mine who got cancer, and so because I was dating Catherine, we just kind of decided that I would move in with her. Just because of immunocompromised situation, because I was like still using her laundry room and some facilities and things like that. And so then eventually I just moved in, and our arrangement is essentially we are working together on a couple of projects that have not yet paid off. And so I'm essentially working for her in exchange for rent. Basically is kind of like how we've worked it out. It's like the point at which I start making money on some of these projects that we're working on together is the point that I'll start paying rent. So that's kind of the situation that I'm in. That also means I don't have a rent payment right now, which is great. Gas, we use a special card for points for gas. And so I think I just forgot to track it because everything was on, another card. So that's probably an added expense that I missed. I think clothing, I don't spend that much on clothing, but I did. It's funny. I think that was mentally something that I felt like as soon as August hit, I definitely bought something. So that was definitely mentally something that I was like not doing because I was tracking my spending. Booze, I think I mentioned there was no, we had a stockpile. And then travel obviously is not really happening, although I also have a trip to Europe coming up that I hope doesn't get canceled in October. And we have a huge trip, big road trip, where we're going to do a big circle around the United States that starts tomorrow. And so those will be big expenses that aren't represented in this 1 month snapshot.
Yeah.
Does anything else come up as like that I was missing or that you're surprised wasn't there?
Kristen said, "I love that rent exchange. Good luck for however long you can make it work." I always think it's really interesting because, like, one thing we've talked about is that because you're working, like, some of the stuff you all are doing on spec, and you're just both self-employed and therefore doing stuff that, like, stuff in the media world takes. There's no pay, and then there might be a big payday, but it may not come, right. Or you get paid like much later and stuff like that. And I think it's very interesting to talk about how couples and partners and co-parents, just anybody that has shared expenses, the ways that particularly you work when you have like variable income or disparate income. So like one thing I've talked about is that I pay 40% of our rent because I make a lot less. And I technically, if we split it proportional to income, I would pay a lot less than 40%. But for my own feelings of independence, it's like 40% was the lowest I was like willing to go. And that was based on like kind of arbitrary, where it was sort of like when we first moved in together, we both wanted to be paying less because we were going to have less private space than we did when we like previously. Aaron lived alone and I lived with a roommate and I had my own room and I don't have my own room now. And so like I was like, well, I'm not going to pay less to have like less private. I'm not going to pay more to have less private space, but also like I'm moving into a slightly fancier place and I wouldn't move into such a fancy apartment based on just my own housing preferences. Yep. And that's like how it kind of evolved. So I went down by like $40 in rent, and then Aaron went down by like $500 or $600 in rent, just because he had been living by himself and I had been living with a roommate, and Yeah.
I think if Catherine and I split based on income, then she might end up paying me, because she's financially she's doing a lot better than I am.
Right. I think it's always hard because you also like, especially in romantic relationships, you want to maintain some kind of like it's important to feel confident in your own money and independent. Yes. And I feel that way about everyone. Like you always got to have something that the other person can't access and that like you can feel confident in. But you've got to like establish that, and it's different for everyone. Dean gave us a pro tip for investment speakers.
Oh.
I've seen TikToks of this. If you don't wear dead stock speakers, they start to like break down in the sole, so you have to wear them occasionally.
That's insane. I didn't know that. Hold on.
Apparently just stand in them. Yeah, I've seen like they crumble if they're not worn. Sorry, I interrupted what you were saying about rent.
Oh, just no, less rent and more just the relationship dynamic aspect. I've been in relationships in the past where it made the most sense to do everything 50-50 or trying to do that kind of percentage thing that you talked about. And, with Catherine being an established television writer, she's making, and this last year she's been like super employed and doing really well. Whereas I've been like, I have the savings that I've been like, okay, I have this long before I have to like kind of figure out something, or I can kind of keep doing this. We're very good at just vibing it out and talking about it, and I think we're both comfortable enough having those conversations, which is a very different thing for me historically in relationships. So I think that comes down to something of values as well.
Yeah. Cheryl pointed out that taxes are not included in here. And that sounds like because you just don't think about them.
I don't think about them. I just do. I think this year my income was like, it's going to be so low. I did a little bit of freelancing. They're going to send me like, what's that? W-249, whichever one.
W-4 or 1099 if you're freelance.
I think I was 1099. Yeah, and so I think I'm going to file that with like stupid TurboTax again and call it a day. Like I'm super simple. I used to be really complicated. I used to have a separate company entity for a lot of the stuff that I was doing online. But I don't have an accountant anymore, so I just decided to simplify all that. The next
and then we
slides
have your line by lines.
Yeah, the next slides are super boring, but I thought I would include them just because They are probably a little hard to see, but they're basically just the daily spends. The ones in white are the days I didn't spend anything. So there's not. I don't know. There's like 3 of these. We could go through them, but they're not super exciting.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Cheryl says, I mentioned the house because even if the house is paid, there's still taxes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we rent.
I don't know if Catherine owns the house.
Here.
Yeah.
Rents. No. Oh yeah, we rent, so it's not a tax issue there. But she did give up. This is her former spare bedroom that is now my office. That was a big relationship negotiation we made that I guess I technically don't pay for. So that's nice of her.
Christine says, don't do TurboTax. Invest in a good accountant. Mine has even saved me dollars when I wasn't making much. I don't necessarily agree with this advice. I would recommend going to, if your income is low, if your income's below around $60,000 a year, you can go and have volunteers do your taxes for free for you, and they will help. And their whole goal is to help you get back the earned income tax credit. It's through AARP or TaxAid. And I highly, highly recommend utilizing it if you are in that like income range, just because obviously having a person to help you with it. But
I also hate TurboTax. Yeah. I hate them. I hate them so much. I hate Intuit.
It's also the word for Kleenex, industry, right?
But that whole industry is bad, and I don't like participating in it. And yet I find it every year as it gets closer, I'm like, and I get lazy and I do it. So I don't disagree with what she said either. I think I believe that you should pay people to do good work, but or take advantage of a free resource.
Yeah. Also, I'm a tax preparer. Just ask me. I'll tell you what to do. Christine said, that's right. Forget the volunteer approach. I will also say, like, I'm a tax preparer, and I usually file my taxes online, even though I run a business and have a day job. But I do also know what I'm doing. So I don't use TurboTax. I use a different one called Freedom Tax that is like less scammy, but a little more dialed back. Like they're like less aggressive with the.
Maybe we should put a pin in this for next tax season. We could do like a multi-part series of you walking me through it and actually do like a live, like, here it is.
Live taxes would be great. That sounds very fun to me.
Stream
maybe
right to
no
Twitch.
One else in the whole world. Does anybody have any questions for KMikeyM? Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Like, did you find that there were any areas that you like felt like, the phrase I like to use, like regrettable spending, things you looked back at and you were like, oh, I actually don't feel great about having spent money on that?
I think especially because the total was like, $2,500, it's hard to regret any part of it specifically. Like when I look back at it, I'm like, man, I'm doing a pretty good job. And I'm like, I think a lot of those things could even be a little bit higher. One thing that's interesting, you don't have to bring the slide back up, but like our arrangement on spending is like groceries are split 50-50, right? Anything that's like mine specifically is I pay for. And then there's, I think car, not including gas, but car stuff, Catherine pays 75% on. And just because Georgie is Catherine's dog, she pays 75% of things like that. So, and we buy like crazy expensive dog food. That's very much a value, is keeping Georgie alive and healthy. So there's a couple things where like the percentages, it's very easy for me to go to the pet store and be like, I'm going to buy Georgie these really expensive snacks. Cause I'm like, that's not my money. I don't do that too often, but yeah. So I think the things that I regret or the things that I'm like, when I look back on, I'm like, oh, the spreadsheet that I started that tracks my charitable giving, and I include things like, even if it's not to a charity, things like mutual aid and things like that on there. It feels very low in this one. Like, some of it's not tax deductible is what I mean by that. And I have some like silly Patreon stuff that I just give every month to, and that's easy and by default. And if I don't go out of my way, it ends up looking more like like a $70 a month. And I'd like it to be more than that. This year, through tracking in Airtable, like all of my donations, I got really motivated and did the charity poker game as part of my shareholder conference. And so even though technically it wasn't all my money in my spreadsheet, I like to be like, oh, I was the instigator of the giving of this, like, an extra $2,000 kind of thing. And that was super fun. And I enjoyed doing that. I've been really struggling to find the right kind of like veteran based nonprofit that I want to give money to, or, organization, because, conflicted feelings about the military in general, military industrial complex, and finally found one, though I haven't given them any money yet, that trains dogs to hang out with like soldiers who have PTSD, which is like everything that I care about combined. Basically.
It's all of your values combined.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that when I found that, my friend Marcus shared that with me, I was like, oh, definitely doing this. And I did just have a pretty impactful life event where this company that I co-founded with Marcus, actually, I got bought out of a bunch of shares because I was a co-founder. I vested in all my shares. I'm no longer part of the company. And so just to sort of like reduce me on the cap table of percentage ownership, I got a nice little payout. And so I have some giving to do, which is pretty exciting.
Nice. Emily is extremely supportive of these tax live streams, as is Christine. How to do taxes without paying Intuit any money at all. I will also say I do tax month, which lasts longer than a month, on the Oh My Dollar podcast every year. So, which was also like timed super weird the past 2 years because tax month didn't turn out to like work out the way I want to. Christine asked, if either of you ate out more in the past, I would do this if I live in Portland. Have you done any comparison of food, groceries, eating out versus mostly groceries? I haven't actually like done a writing up of it, but I have the data, and I can actually like pull up the data, I think. But for me, it is so apparent when I'm on the road because, like, for example, in 2019, I lived out of the U.S. for I was traveling for 3 straight months total of the year, where I was like not in Portland, and it's very obvious the breakdown because I don't tend to eat out very much in Portland generally. I eat out more during Pedalpalooza, which is our bike festival. It's usually only 1 month. It used to only be 2.5 weeks. This summer, it's 3 months long because we all need more bike rides. But that is like, it's a very like, for a long time, it was very much ride to a bar and hang out. But there's also a lot of picnic rides, and I lead a picnic ride, so my groceries don't necessarily go down proportional. I just budget a lot more money in June, which for me is not... I think it's similar to a lot of other people's average restaurant spending, but like I had 1 month where I spent like almost $200 on eating out in bars and stuff, and it was because it was Pedalpalooza, and I also was gone for like week-long bike ride with 2,000 other people, and so I was eating, I was going out to bars with other people that were working the ride and stuff like that, and I was in the middle of nowhere, so you don't get to shop around. There's one bar in halfway Idaho, so you're you're going to that bar.
Just starting tomorrow, we start this road trip, and I actually created a special section on my Instagram called Snack Journal, where I just plan on tracking a lot of the eating out because I'm so excited to eat out again, And so like for 5 days going up to Catherine's parents' house, we're just going to be eating out for like every meal. And then when we get there, we'll be eating with our family, and that'll reduce the budget. But I do think on those trips, I think eating out's going to go way up. And but yeah, I don't know. I have this thing. Years ago, I ran this blog community called Urban Honking that was sort of Portland based, and it was a lot of people, kind of pre-social media internet community. And my theory was always that you can double the value of anything by documenting, writing about it, and sharing it. So basically, you get the first value of like if it's about food, you consume it, and then you get the second value of like write something about it, write about your experience, turn it into something, like do something with your consumption to turn it into production, and you can kind of you can 2x everything, basically, or
Yeah.
half the cost, right? Because you can think of the cost in two ways. So that was part of my inspiration of just being like, okay, I'm going to be. It will also, in the same way that tracking my spending makes me more focused on spending in the right ways, in ways that I'm proud of to share, right? Like there's like a weird thing of like spending $26 on a hot sauce that we ordered, and it was like, oh, because it was this very specific one from this company, individually manufactured, like, again, like values based. And so if I'm going to track all my eating and all my snacking, I want to buy like weird things like this Henry cider, that local, just like
Speaking
buying.
of which,
Yeah.
It's time for us to eat our donuts. We've like let Cheryl says she wants us to do a donuts cheer. So like we try to like move them to the side of our screens.
Wait. It's very confusing. I think mine's over here.
I don't know how to do.
There we go.
There we go. That was our cheers.
I don't know if it looked like cheers for them, but yeah. I love a cake donut. I have a coffee subscription from this company, and they did a food items that go with coffee kind of like bracket battle with votes, and cake donuts got destroyed by Raised Donuts, and I was so bummed. But I'm like, F a Raised Donut.
I'm a Raised Donut fan.
Oh, cake for days.
But this is like a fritter, but it's a corn fritter. Because normally fritters are like raised donuts with fruit in them, but it has corn in it. I don't really taste the maple syrup.
Fritters are also, I feel like they're so dense usually. They're like heavy. Does that feel?
It's not light. It's not a light donut.
I almost got a plain cake, which is honestly like my favorite donut. But I feel like a plain cake you have to have with coffee. And so I went a little bit sweeter because of the cider. Now it's just an eating podcast.
Dean says, 2 finance nerds trying to hide donut. Hilarious. I'm glad to provide you with a quality content, Dean. Yeah, Cheryl says, been there, done that, fancy salsa. Yeah, like we actually make our own hot sauce just because I consume so much hot sauce that it was like not tenable. You can actually read an article in the paper that was about our local secret aardvark hot sauce, which is like a cult hot sauce here in Portland. And I dressed up as a secret aardvark superhero and like served coffee on a bridge for Halloween. And I went through so much secret aardvark hot sauce that I was heavily interviewed as like a rabid fan of the hot sauce. There are like 3 paragraphs about my obsession in this like piece on the hot sauce. And the company was so sweet that after they came out, they were like, hey, you're just rad. Can we just bring you a gallon of hot sauce? And so I got a gallon of secret aardvark. And what was terrifying was how quickly I went through that gallon. Yeah. And then I had another coworker gift me. My birthday gift was a half gallon of the secret aardvark hot sauce, which they don't like do. They don't sell, but they were like, my coworker emailed them and was like, hey, it's for Lily. Can you like,
it's like industrial
bring around a half gallon?
Yeah. I find that thing you're describing, like when you have a lot, it almost goes faster. During the really dark pandemic times, we were definitely drinking a little more, and I was like, I know, I'll be smart and I'll buy 12 bottles of wine and get the case discount, which seems so brilliant until you realize that you're going through wine more than twice as fast and you did not get a 50% discount on wine.
Well, you're also like aware that there's always more, right? Like the lack of like when you don't have where you're like, oh, I have to go back out to the store if I drink this one. When you don't have that problem, then you're like, oh crap. I went through a lot more coffee during COVID, but that was one of the areas where I decided to increase my spending. One, I used to get free coffee through work. Like, not only was I a barista, I also worked at a radio station that had a coffee sponsorship. And then my other office was like, the coffee was terrible, so I almost never drank it there. But a local, like, in the neighborhood vegan restaurant started roasting their own coffee and, like, putting it in these, like, gorgeous bags and, like, hand lettering it, and it was single sourced. And I was like, I don't want you to not exist. and they like weren't open really. And I also am so bad at doing takeout restaurants and stuff that I felt like, well, this is a way I can support you, and like, so I just like upped my coffee budget because I was like, this is a way that is spending according to my values as someone who previously like got the fair trade Trader Joe's $7 like pound of coffee, which was like my in between, like, yeah, it's fine. Supplements the good coffee at work. Yeah, Aaron says now we make a gallon of habanero hot sauce at a time. It's true. But we do can it, so we kind of avoid the limitless supply bit. Also, I see how hard it is for Aaron to make it, so. Yes, Aaron is not here for the donut tax, but Aaron would be so on board with this donut tax. This is a really good... we have to give our ratings and reviews of our donuts. This one is a 4 out of 5, I would say. It's not overly sweet. It's nice and, like... It's got this, like, topping that is, like, actual cornbread stuff on the top. And then it has whole bits of, like, roasted in maple syrup corn kernels. It's A+. It's very inventive, but not overly sweet.
Yeah, I'm super curious about that donut. Like, that's an amazing looking donut. Mine is, I feel like the donut I had, which is gone now, is... So, a standard toasted coconut cake, donut from one of the biggest chains in America. And it's still like, that was a 3 out of 5. I mean, it was not a bad donut. I enjoyed it. On a scale of 5, I follow the old Netflix rating system, which in my mind was always the best rating system, which was 1 star was, I hated it. 2 stars didn't like it. 3 stars liked it. 4 stars really liked it, and 5 stars loved it. And the reason I love that rating system is, number one, there's no decimals. You have to choose. Basically, that difference between 2 and 3 is huge. And I like that it skews optimistic. There's 3 options for like and only 2 for dislike. So a 5-star system in that way, I think, is the perfect system.
Why do you want to skew optimistic?
Oh, I think I lost audio for a second, I think.
Oh, did we? Oh, why do you want to skew optimistic?
I don't know if it's why I want to as much as I just do mentally. I'm wired that way.
Oh, okay. That's fair. Apparently I have to save a remote donut tax. Anybody have any other questions to wrap up? Otherwise, I'll just ask people what they're up to this week.
Hear Lillian.
Oh no. Can people hear me on the chat?
Oh, okay, great. I'm having audio issues. It might be bandwidth stuff on my end, but why do I want to skew optimistic? I think was the last question I heard. I think it's more interesting to have. I think definitely forcing people to decide whether they like it or not to have a neutral space. Like if it's a 1 through 5 system and 3 is neutral, I find that very boring and uninteresting. If someone's like 3 and you're like, that's dumb. But if you have to say you like it or you don't like it, that actually makes the value system
now I'm having
meaningful.
audio issues. We may have to...
I think we're having technical issues where we're live, but we can't necessarily hear each other. But we could just talk over the top of each other.
I think it's possible that my computer has now completely overheated.
I hear Aaron great. So I'll take over now. I'm the host. Dun, dun, dun. It's my stream now due to audio
I can
issues.
hear you afterwards. There's just like now a very big delay.
All
right.
Well, I don't remember how you sign off. I think
we're going to have to wrap up, even though this looks seamless to the folks
probably. I'll just
online.
Mimic your motions.
Because we now can't communicate to each other. How about people put in the chat what they are up to this week? Thank you for joining us so much, KMikeyM.
Assume her audio is working fine.
And you can find KMikeyM. You can find down link in the show notes. You can find a link to the radio episode we did with KMikeyM and also the previous live stream that we did when I was down in LA. And thank you for coming. Sorry that we've had this slow play off for technical issues. This was like very chaotic to everyone. Tell me what folks are most excited about this week doing. And yeah, tell me what you are up to this week. I can still read chat even if we are having these weird audio delay problems. Dean says, thank you both. It was fun. Yeah. I wonder if other people can hear KMikeyM or if he's just in my ears. We were doing so well. I think the computer just overheats after an hour. Emily says, my stuff is arriving. I'm not at work. Hopefully going to be at the cat shrine in a cave. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Cheryl says, I turned my guest room into a she shed. Now I get to do a project of some sort. Oh yeah, you were talking about that last week where you were doing that in order to like just kind of give up on COVID. Going camping for 3 nights, dying to outside now that we are back on, and staying away from people and more. Cheers.